Today I wanted to do a video on adding dimensions in Twinfield, as it was a query that came through into support today. So I thought it might be helpful, excuse me, for all of our clients if we prepared a video on this to sort of show you how you can add codes and control how those codes are presented within Twinfield. Okay, so in terms of to start off, all your codes and settings exist in the Twinfield system under an area called dimensions. Okay, so to access that area from the sidebar, you would select here. I'm just going to move me out the way and navigate to the dimensions area of the system. Okay, so there's various things in here, as you can see. In terms of breaking these down, these are nominal codes. So these will be the constituent parts of your general ledger or trial balance. Okay, you have customers and suppliers, and then you have cost centers and projects, which will just be departments or items that you're using to further analyze your accounts, tracking categories if you're familiar with that name from the zero equivalent. And then you have fixed assets. Okay, and basically these tiles will provide you with the settings and list of codes that currently exist in the system. Okay, so if I wanted to look at a particular profit and loss code, I would select the profit and loss item. Okay, and what you'll then be presented with is a list of the codes in the system. Okay, and you can then click on a code to access that item and the various settings in this, and you can change the name and press save if you want to update the details of a code. Okay, if you wanted to create a new code entirely, okay, what you can do is, depending on how you've set up the format of these numbers, you can just press first free code, and that will provide the first opportunity of a code, right? In terms of if you've set a particular way that you want, or range of codes that you want these to be presented in, this will provide you with the first available opportunity. It's more likely in terms of the profit and loss that you'll have an idea of which code you want, okay, and you will just be typing that in. So if you wanted, I don't know, this particular code, if I search for it, you can see it doesn't exist. You would then click next, and you need to give it a name. So I'm just going to call this spare code. Okay, JA, and then I'm going to press save. And at the moment that you press save, that code has now been created. Okay, and that principle in terms of typing the number and pressing save is how you create any dimension. And I'll show you another example just with the cost centers, but essentially that is the principle of adding all codes in terms of dimensions as Twinfield calls them. So now if I search for code 5040, you can see that code is there with the typo that I just made. And in terms of removing codes, because I'm now going to remove that, if that code has ever been used, you can't delete it as such, because it will exist in a report somewhere because you've used it against a transaction. Right, so you can see this one I can delete because it's never had a transaction allocated against it. Right, but if you had allocated a code and a transaction, sorry, to this code, you will note that this button changes and it changes to hide. Okay, you cannot fully delete it because something has been allocated to it. All right, but that is effectively what hiding does. Is it will just remove it from any of the views or lists when you're creating a transaction, so that it cannot be selected in the future. Okay, One thing to bear in mind, particularly with balance sheet and profit and loss codes, is if you do create these, you will need to allocate them in your reporting structure, which is a separate process. It's something that if you're not sure about, ask support and they will guide you, because of the way Twinfield works with reporting structures. It's something you need to be a little bit careful with, especially if you want to create that code across a group of companies so that you have a constant chart of accounts across all of your companies. Okay, so something just to bear in mind in terms of balance sheet and P&L. If you want those to be replicated across your group structure, then that is something to ask for help with. Okay, just in terms of showing you a different example, with your cost centers, again, it will work in exactly the same way. It is a little slower because I'm on the video, and it affects the speed of the browser because I'm using up the internet. But you can see here there's two cost centers with a different number set. You can see that previously my nominal codes were 4 digits and these are 5 digits. It's quite a good idea to have different structures for different dimensions so that when you're searching and looking in fields, you can easily identify if something is a cost center or a nominal code or whatever it might be. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Okay, but in terms of first free code, you can see the first one available. It just counts up. I would recommend using numbers for dimensions so that you can use this count facility. If you're using alphanumeric, so letters and numbers, it means that you've got to type it all the time, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is just a code. You can search in any field by name or number. So actually, I would say that in terms of using Twinfield, it is better to just use numbers across the whole system. And all you would simply do is, as I did before, you would just select next, give it a name, which I'm going to try and type correctly this time, and then you press save, and that dimension has now been created. Okay, when that refreshes, I'm then just going to go back into it and I'm going to delete it in the same way. Okay. Just also for the last thing on this video, how to control the structure of your various dimensions and their coding structures. Okay, you can do this within a section in the system which is called dimension types. Okay, and if I go into here, you'll see when it loads the dimension types that exist in the system and the settings of those dimension types. Okay, so if I wanted to have a specific structure to, let's say, my profit and loss codes, you can see here that I've defined how many numbers they should be. Okay, so this says that they should always start 4 to 9, and then the remaining 3 digits are 0 to 9. And I could make that longer if I wanted. I could make it 5 digits. And that places a restriction in the system in terms of how long those codes can be, and the particular format and number sequence that they should have. Okay, you can also do that with letters. So if I wanted this to begin with, something like A to Z, I can do that in between these square brackets, and the system will force a person, when creating a new code, to have the code starting with a letter. Okay, you can actually also hard type what that letter should be. So if you wanted this to start with cost center or department, you can just type the text in, and that will force the code to begin with the letters D in this instance, or whatever it might be that you want it to be. But this is sort of how you can structure your code so that it's easily and quickly identifiable what a code is when you see it in a list, okay, or in a report or whatever it might be. Okay, so that's just a quick guide through on how you can control the coding structure of your dimensions. Okay, that's pretty much all for creating and setting up dimensions. If you do have any questions on this, please contact support and we'll be able to provide any answers to any questions. Thank you. Bye.